Imagine this. You get into the MBA program of your dreams, you spend $200,000 and walk away from 2 years of income, all for one reason: to break into investment banking. But after all of it, recruiting ends and you have no offer. Just the loan payments, which start hitting your account whether you landed a job or not. One of my friends told me the story of how he personally got cut from a bank he was deep in the process with, not because of his technicals or his resume, but because of one honest sentence he said to the wrong person, and he called himself a dead man walking from that moment on. What's scary is that this doesn't happen to the unprepared people at the bottom. It happens to smart, accomplished people who did everything they thought they were supposed to do. I've helped students break into bulge bracket and elite boutique banks from MBA programs, and after the dust settled and they had their offers, they always say the same thing: MBA banking recruiting was way harder than they anticipated. So whether you're watching this because you're considering getting an MBA or if you're starting this upcoming fall, let me help break down for you the MBA banking recruiting process so you walk in already knowing the game. And by the way, if you're serious about breaking into banking, I work with MBA candidates one-on-one through my program, the Banking Accelerator, which I'll talk about more at the end of the video. All right, so first up, let me explain why banking recruiting for MBAs is a completely different game from undergrad. The single biggest difference between undergrad and MBA recruiting is who chases whom. In undergrad, for the most part, you are the one chasing the banks, cold emailing, begging for coffee chats, and hoping someone replies. But at the MBA level, the banks come to you. When I was leading recruiting at JP Morgan for UC Berkeley, I worked with HR to collect resumes, set up info sessions, and never interacted with the school itself. In contrast, I helped my MBA friends at Wharton prep for MBA recruiting, and I was shocked in a really good way to see how structured the whole process was. MBA programs have deep, formal relationships with banks who basically use them as a filter to hire a certain number of associates each year who have passed the bar to get into that school. And across the board, the structure is intense. One Yale MBA student I helped said it was almost military in how organized it is. The school gives you a printed schedule, they tell you what to wear, they tell you when to get your hair cut, they tell you whether you can wear earrings, and they tell you exactly which weeks to send which emails. As she put it, you don't have to think, you just have to go out there and execute. Another really big difference is that there's a huge culture of giving back from second-year students. Unlike in undergrad where you have to join a business org or befriend older classmates to get peer help, the finance or banking club at each MBA program will have a small army of second-year students who just came back from summer internships at all the top banks there to help you out. They'll run workshops, mock interviews, and spend hours with you just because they received help 1 year earlier, and 100% of the time, you're going to benefit more from them than your program's career center counselor. But even with all this structure and help, the students I work with never say the process is easy because it's a high-stakes, compressed war. Everyone at the MBA level has spent years and a huge amount of money to get there, so the competition is a room full of accomplished people who all decided it's banking or bust. So you're competing against the best of the best who are willing to go all out to get their dream offer. And so structure doesn't mean easy, it just means that the rules are clear. And on that note, let's talk about the timeline, which is different at every school. Every school runs its own calendar, and these timelines have meaningful implications. So some schools throw you into recruiting within the first few weeks of school, while others give you a month or so to settle in before things kick off. I spoke with one Cornell MBA student who helped break down his experience to shed some light on how structured the timeline can be. You arrive in August and they give you about a week or so to meet your classmates and chill, but then it's game time. By week 2, you're building your resume, and by weeks 2 and 3, you're doing dedicated coffee chats with second years on a hard deadline. He described windows like you must speak to 3 city second years between these dates, and if you don't, you're cut automatically. The banks themselves start showing up in the first 2 weeks of September, and info sessions and official interviews start the first week of October. From there, it's a 6-week sprint to Thanksgiving that requires traveling from Ithaca to New York City basically every week, interviewing Wednesdays and Thursdays with Fridays for the banks that don't follow the standard process, which basically translates to skipping classes and not having a social life. Interviews are held in a slot system with 3 interview blocks a day, roughly 9 to 11, 12 to 2, and 3 to 5. 3 slots a day and 2 main days means you realistically interview with about 6 banks a week. The week before Thanksgiving is the big cut week, and then Thanksgiving itself is hopefully quiet, but you're probably spending it prepping for super days, which kick off right afterwards, meaning that after an intense 4 months, you finally get your offer in December. Now, this is all all on the faster end, so let's contrast this with Wharton, which moves a bit slower. At Wharton, you settle in by mid-August, and info sessions don't start until mid-October in what's called Opportunity Week, where every top bank comes to campus in 1 week. So you're meeting over 100 bankers and sending thank you emails like it's your full-time job. In November and December, you're spending a lot of days traveling from Philadelphia to New York, sometimes with only 24 hours notice because a banker asks you the night before if you have time tomorrow. And this is what my friends said was most exhausting, because you might be spending 3 hours traveling for a 30-minute chat in extremely cold East Coast weather just to prove how much you want to work 90 hours a week at Goldman Sachs or Evercore. Lots of banks start cutting throughout these 2 weeks depending on how much they like you during coffee chats. And then you have back-to-back first-round interviews and super days in the first 2 weeks of January. Afterwards, you get your offer, and then you can actually start enjoying school again. So your school's timeline is extremely important because it determines how much runway you actually have to prepare. If you're going somewhere like Cornell or Yale that starts banking recruiting right away, then you can't arrive in August without some prep. And the people who win are the ones who did the prep over the summer before day one. And so if you're an MBA candidate about to enter banking recruiting this fall, what should you be doing right now? I asked 2 students in my mentorship program, the Banking Accelerator, who are exactly in your shoes to share their advice with you. So one went from Yale to Bank of America M&A, and then the other went from Wharton to Evercore TMT, and I started working with them the summer before their first year. The first tip was to nail your why banking story, especially if you're pivoting. Almost everyone in MBA banking recruiting is coming from a non-traditional, non-finance background. The Wharton student I helped, Alonzo, for example, had experience in consumer, sales, telecom, and was the CEO of his family's hotel. So he had a whole lot of different experiences that made it kind of challenging to create a convincing story that he was born to be a banker. When you're making a jump and pivot like this, you need a clear, convincing narrative for why your background leads naturally to banking. And after brainstorming, we uncovered that Alonzo's hotel had gone through a potential acquisition process, and we used this as a launching point for his why banking answer, and also highlighted his finance experience while running his hotel to round out his answer. We created a story that highlighted his leadership experience as a hotel CEO and really doubled down on it because that was what really made him a memorable candidate, and that's what you need to prepare so bankers remember you during coffee chats and interviews. Brainstorming and refining and thinking about your story and choosing the right details really takes a lot longer than you expect, so make sure to get started on this ASAP. The second tip is to pick your target group early, and if it's a coverage group, start learning about the industry as soon as you can. Don't show up to school wanting banking in general. Know whether you're going to go for tech, healthcare, restructuring, consumer, M&A, or whatever it is. Once you've picked your lane, sign up for newsletters to keep up with industry trends, look through recent deals, and most importantly, build a story that sounds like someone who actually wants that group, not someone who's spraying and praying for every single bank and coverage group. To give you an example for what we did with the Yale MBA student I worked with, she had experience working in Big Four previously, and given that she had experience with a lot of different clients in different industries, we used that as part of her story to make her a great M&A candidate. M&A is a group that requires a lot of technical expertise, which she had through her accounting background, and also the group serves clients in different industries, so that was just a perfect group for her to really go for. Compared to analysts who are expected to leave after 2 years, at the MBA level, you can't as easily hop over to private equity or a hedge fund, so a lot of associates are the ones who become MDs and future senior bankers. As a result, bankers have a much higher bar and care a lot more about how much you're genuinely interested in their group to see if you have long-term fit potential. To give you a quick example, when I was at JPM Healthcare, our best MBA associates went to med school previously, and they were immediately taken to client meetings even as interns because they were easy to put in front of clients. The third and a very important tip is to rely on your second years, but be careful with being too open with them. Second year students are assigned to mentor you often in small pods, and the good ones genuinely help. But never ever forget that they're wearing their bank's hat. They are simultaneously your mentor and a scout reporting back to the firm. For example, one of my friends thought he could fully trust his mentor, but didn't realize that she was feeding intel back to the bank. The bank was deciding who to advance to the super day, and they called her and asked point blank where they stood with him, and she called him that night and asked directly, where do we rank? He was honest, told her that they were strong, but maybe his number 4, not his top 3. And from that moment, even though he was deep in the recruiting process with that bank, in his own words, he was a dead man walking. And the lesson is not to lie here. It's to understand that your rankings are sensitive competitive information and the person asking may not be a neutral party. So be warm and be genuine, but be thoughtful about revealing your exact pecking order and what you tell second years. Lean on and learn from them and let them champion you, but be strategic about what you reveal. The fourth and single most repeated advice was to make your technicals a check the box. With how competitive banking recruiting is, there are a ton of variables that you can't control. You can't control your culture fit with a group, whether you need visa sponsorship and which group has headcount. The only thing that you can fully control is your technical ability. Now look, I'm not saying mastering technicals is easy, especially if it's your first time going through the material, and you definitely need to put a lot of time into it and run lots of mock interviews to get everything down, but it really should be the last thing that prevents you from getting an offer because you have total control over how much you can study. All right, so those were the 4 tips, but last but not least, let's talk about numbers because this is a big reason you pay the big bucks to get an MBA and work all those hours, right? Associate pay is a little bit funky because your start date is in the middle of the year in July, and this is known as your stub year. For full-time during this stub year, you're typically paid a $50,000 signing bonus, a base salary of $175,000, and a stub bonus that's for around 6 months of pay of around $50,000, totaling to $187,500 in your first 6 months. Not too shabby. Then in your first full year as an associate, your base salary starts at $175K and your year-end bonus ranges from $100 to $150K depending on your performance, totaling to around $275 to $325K. In year 2, you can expect a base salary of $200K and bonus of $125 to $175, totaling $325 to $375K. And in year 3, a base of $225K, bonus of $150 to $225, totaling $375 to $450,000. So those were numbers for bulge bracket banks. And so 2 other quick nuances is that first, at elite boutiques, base salaries and bonuses are notably higher. And so you can think of making around $25,000 to $50,000 or more each year depending on the bank. Second is that if you're at a public company, a portion of your bonus is paid in equity that vests over several years, which is designed to make you want to stay longer. As a last note, for your summer internship, you can expect to earn a prorated salary. So what this means is since base is $175K and internships are typically around 10 weeks long, you'll make around $34K in the summer, which you can use to fund your MBA travels or pay off some loans. So as you've learned, MBA recruiting is way more structured, and it's true that you just need to execute well, and most likely you're going to get an offer, especially if you go to a top program. But the ones who get their top choices and maximize that $200,000 MBA investment are the ones who prepare early and walk into the first few weeks with a massive head start over classmates. Now, you may be fine, but if you've been watching this and you feel overwhelmed or anxious about MBA banking recruiting, that's exactly why I built the Banking Accelerator. We match you with a current or former full-time banker from your MBA program who successfully recruited for your target office, whether that's New York, San Francisco, or London, so you can get one-to-one help that leads to offers. The students you heard about today who landed offers at Evercore and Bank of America started building their stories, learning their industries, and sharpening their technicals before classes even began, and that's what helped them land their dream offers. If you're headed to an MBA program or plan to in the future and you want to maximize your ROI, book a free strategy call with my team using the link in the description. But regardless if we work together or not, make sure to get your reps in early. Get preparing right now as soon as you can because the best offers go to the ones who are the most prepared. That's it for me. Thanks so much as always for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions and hope to catch you all in the next video.